What does it mean to thrive as a youth worker in today's rapidly changing youth culture? And what are the best practices we can employ to ensure that we are faithfully serving the Lord in this high calling of ministering to students? We're tackling those questions and more as I chat with a trio of seasoned youth workers from the National Network of Youth Ministries, Wayne Morgan, Travis Deans, and Tony Villafane, on this episode of Youth Culture Matters.
From the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding, this is Youth Culture Matters. If you're a parent, youth worker, educator, counselor, grandparent, or anyone else who cares about kids, we're glad you've joined us for this practical, informative, and hope-filled podcast. This is a place where together we talk and think Christianly about the rapidly changing world of today's children, teens, and young adults.
Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Youth Culture Matters. I'm Walt Bueller here at CPYU. And man, we got a good one for you today because we finally worked to get this crew of guys that we've been trying to get together for some time together. And we got 3 out of 4. I think that's pretty good. We're batting .750 here on that one. And so I'm excited to have 3 friends who we'll introduce you to in just a minute, talking about some of what's happening in the world of youth ministry and introducing you to the organization that they work for and work with, the National Network of Youth Ministries. And I'm just going to say this right out of the gate that, when I first got back into, after seminary, went back into local church youth ministry, there was this wonderful resource that appeared, and I was working at a church outside of Philadelphia. You got to remember, no smartphones, no internet. Al Gore hadn't invented it yet. There was nothing like that. And I was just getting into using a computer and for word processing and writing and things like that. So there wasn't a lot of access to things, except in the youth ministry world. There was this wonderful organization, the National Network of Youth Ministries, that I can't remember if it was every quarter or every month. I waited with bated breath for this package to arrive. I joined the National Network of Youth Ministries, and these resource boxes would arrive regularly that had in their books, CDs, DVDs, VHS tapes. There were all kinds of things that we got, resources that we received as members of the National Network of Youth Ministries, and it was just a gold mine. You were like, as a youth worker, a kid on Christmas morning. And, things changed, obviously, where we could start to access everything online. And a lot of us sort of lost track of what was happening with the National Network of Youth Ministries. But as I've told these guys, each of them, I think, individually over the course of time that I've known them, that it's been so refreshing to see the National Network, I don't know if the word is revive, but actually change with the times and become super relevant and helpful for all of us who are in youth ministry. So I'm glad to welcome these guys. Wayne Morgan, they voted him. Did they vote you the senior guy on the call?
I'm not the oldest guy, though.
You're not the oldest, but okay.
And Travis has been doing networking longer than I've been alive. So I think he has a certain amount of outrank for me. So
yeah. So let me just go real quickly. So Wayne, your position, what is it that you're doing with the National Network?
Yeah, so I'm vice president of ministries with National Network. So.
And that involves doing
partnership development on a national level and doing just rallying our staff, being a part of the ministry side of things, just seeing the guys are seeing what they're doing, and then if we can replicate it someplace else in the country, we just pull it in and make it part of the ethos at NNYM.
Yeah, so we'll hear more about how you function, but you mentioned, the people who are involved. How many staff people do you have now, the network?
We have over 30 on staff right now.
That's great.
Okay. So when I joined, we had 12, so we've been growing.
Okay. So let me, I'll go to Travis next, because Travis, you are the senior guy chronologically, I think, age-wise.
He's the GOAT.
Is that right, Travis? Travis Deans?
We'll just leave that a mystery. Okay,
yeah. And it's fun because Travis is joining us from his car, so we don't hear all the chaos that's going on in his home right now. So I'm loving that. We all know what that's like, Travis. When you've got that stuff going on with kids in the house. But Travis, man, you've been doing this for a long time. What's your position, Travis?
I am the Northeast Regional Coordinator, so I serve youth pastors in New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. And I'm also the National Campus Ministry Specialist. So I keep an eye on what's happening with campus ministries around the country on the high school, middle school level.
Yeah, and we'll hear more about that for sure. And we've had you on the podcast and a couple of our podcasts to talk about 9-month mission trip and some other things that we'll hear about in a little bit.
Always a privilege.
Yep. And then Tony Villafane is joining us from the beautiful world of Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, right, Tony? Are you in Lancaster?
Yes.
Or are you in Chester?
My church, Gateway Church, is in Chester County, right on the line of Lancaster, Chester. But reside in Lancaster County and a lot of ministry in both counties.
Yeah, and talk about your position with the network.
So I am not the veteran. I am the more spry new guy within NNYM. I've only been on staff for about a year and a half now at the recording of this episode, and I get to serve Lancaster County and Chester County as just a coordinator with youth workers. So more in the local area of what I get to do.
That's great. Yeah, and you're involved full time, I think, in your local church. Is that as well? Yeah.
So I had been full time. I was 6 years full time as a youth pastor, and then I went down to part time as a youth pastor at Gateway Church. So I work part time with NNYM, and then part time still as a youth pastor at the church that I love, and So delighted to be a part of.
Yeah, good. And all these guys are joining us from Pennsylvania. So now. We always try to take a little time to get to know the folks we have on the podcast. And if we had just one guest, one of the fun things we like to do, we call it Take 5, where we make the guest take 5 questions that they probably have never been asked before and they haven't heard from us prior and answer in the moment just as a way to get to know you. So I'm going to go back to one. I'm going to ask all 3 of you this. We're not going to ask 5 questions to everybody, but in one of our first podcast episodes, we had a question that was just one of the best. I don't know if Chris remembers which one this was, but I'm gonna ask it. Do you know which one it was?
I have an idea.
Which one do you think it is?
Does it involve animals?
No, this one is not the animals.
All right, it's not what
there was another one. You gotta remind me of what that one was. I can't remember what that was. Maybe we asked these guys that question, but I don't remember the animal one. But the smells.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that? That was a great. Yes. We did a lot of laughing. So, all right. So here you go. This is for all 3 of you. What is the oddest smell that you enjoy? Oddest smell that you enjoy. Oh, they're thinking. Yeah. And
wow. That is something that's like a middle school question. Like a student comes up to you and is like, what's that?
Well, look who you're talking to here, Wayne. I mean, that's the level that we get to here.
So I don't think this is. I think men will understand this. Like I think the ladies out there would think what, but the smell of sawdust. I mean, that's good. Just, right, guys? That's a great smell. In fact, I need a candle that's sawdust scent. You know what I mean? Like that's.
Oh.
You know what?
Second only to freshly cut lawn. Those are.
I'm going to tell you right now. Use the internet, Travis, because I am absolutely certain that candle is out there.
Undoubtedly,
I am certain because I ran into a candle that was it's like wood. Like when you when you go into a lumber yard or you go into Home Depot or you go into Lowe's. I love that smell too.
Absolutely.
But mine would be cut grass, fresh cut grass, and there's a candle for that. So yeah. Wayne, Tony, we'll go to Chris last because he is a super sniffer.
Super sniffer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. He's like my wife. Yeah.
All right. So I'll share 2, and hopefully I don't get in trouble for the second one. The first one is just a great smell of steak. Just a good, like off the grill, so maybe more the grill smell is kind of what I'm thinking about, but just something that's seasoned well, coming off of a grill, is like, oh, so good.
That's such a safe answer. I can't wait to hear the second.
Oh yeah. So now we got the extremes. So I promise I don't have a problem. I promise.
Oh, this will be good.
But I like the smell of smelling a Sharpie. Like if a new strong Sharpie just has this has this smell to it.
I got you.
That's good, you know. Now I've heard that maybe you can get high off of Sharpie if you sniff it long enough, but I haven't gotten that far. It's not a problem yet.
Yeah, I can stop anytime I want.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
You had a lot of those Mr. Sketch scented markers growing up as a kid, didn't you?
That's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Outed. So yep, that's my vulnerability right there to start.
I appreciate that vulnerability, Tony, because
You're
I
fired.
had no idea where you're going to end up going. Yeah, like you know that's a pretty safe one, I think. Man, I feel like I like Travis's. I love the scent of freshly cut wood, but there's something about the chainsaw gas mix too that makes you just feel manly, you know, like so. You know, so anything that has the scent of like I used to coach water skiing, so like when you hit the throttle on that boat, you could smell the gas. You know, I ride motorcycle, so like there just has to be a little petroleum mixed in, and then I'm good to go. So
yes, there is something.
Don't you wear that cologne, Wayne? Isn't that a cologne?
Yes, yeah, it's called 87 octane. Yeah, so
or 40 to 1. Usually, like we had the conversation about the gas, didn't we, Chris? That was great.
Yeah, gas definitely came up.
Wayne, you add a new level to it because as you know, doing boating, I love the smell of exhaust on the water. There is something about that just says summer, and it's probably destroying brain cells. But yeah, and you added a new level with the the 2-cycle mix for the chainsaw, the gas and the oil. Chris, where do you go with this?
There's too many weird ways I could go. They took a lot of the good ones.
You're a Sharpie guy too?
You guys want to meet up in a parking lot somewhere?
There are we live in a good county for this. There are some really good, and there's also some really bad farm smells. But sometimes they catch you in a way that's like, that's actually pleasant in a weird way.
When they're throwing the stuff down on the fields. The slushy,
Not so much that the liquid chicken stuff, but there's some other ones that every once in a while when it's usually pretty pungent, but sometimes it hits you in a way that's like, that's not too bad.
Tony knows those smells being down there on the eastern side of the county.
All too well.
Yeah. All right. That's good. All right. I'm just going to give you one more question. Man, what do I got some good ones here. Okay. Because we're talking about kids. You guys are involved in youth ministry. I want you to rewind to when you were 13 years old. All right. Which pretty much when you would enter your teenage years back in the day, that was the onset of adolescence. We used to talk in the old days about adolescence running from 13 to 18, 13 to 19. Of course, we all know that adolescence, as developmental experts will tell us for a variety of reasons, is starting earlier in life, both physically, socially, and, in terms of the challenges, choices, pressures, expectations kids have, and lasting much longer. But go back to 13. When you were 13, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, this is easy. I wanted to be a New York State trooper. I thought driving fast and carrying a gun sounded like an awesome idea. So and then New York State, they had the dark blue cars with the yellow stripe across the side. Man, that was tough.
That was the ultimate, huh? Now, did you grow up in New York State or were you in Pennsylvania?
No, I grew up in Binghamton, New York.
Oh, okay. All right. So, you got that. All right. That's great. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Travis is laughing. Travis, what do you...
I was such an awkward 13-year-old. I don't know. I don't know what
Okay, keep thinking.
You didn't have any passions or excitements? I actually, interestingly enough, Wayne, earlier than 13, I actually thought about being a cop myself as well for a short period of time. But at 13, it was baseball. Like I wanted to go pro. I was a baseball buff. That was my passion. That was my world. I love Jesus, but I love baseball equally, or more at times. And so I was that 13-year-old kid, and like many of us probably in the sport world, are like, oh, like I'm gonna go pro one day, and then one day, reality hits you in the face that you're not that good, or whatever. But it was baseball for me, and that was my love and my passion.
Wow,
it's awesome.
Travis, we're coming back to you. We're circling back.
What I remember, the furthest back I remember, is thinking that I could be a good teacher. I think I thought I could make it as a teacher, and I don't know if there was anything else, but that's the one I remember the most.
I was thinking, with your passion for evangelism and seeing kids come to faith, I thought you'd say Billy Graham. You wanted to be Billy Graham. But,
be the next Billy Graham.
Yeah, be the next Billy Graham. But that's good. Yeah. Chris, what about you?
I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but I wanted to own my own baseball card shop.
Okay, baseball card shop.
I probably realized already at that point that, going pro in sports wasn't my thing. Yeah. So selling baseball cards, that was the closest I could get.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I always had those baseball dreams too, but I think 12, 13 years old, I was fascinated with, possibly because my dad was a pastor and he had a dear friend. In fact, just talked to this guy's daughter a while ago, who was a funeral director. And I was actually thinking about going into that business. Yeah, which is crazy to think about it now. I'm like, why did I? Yeah. Anyway. Well, listen, good. That's a good way to get to know you. When you're on the next time you're on with us, I'll ask you this question: what is your favorite cheese? So start thinking about that now. But let's go back to National Network Youth Ministries. Can one of you guys just a little bit of the story and what the National Network is and how it serves youth workers?
Yeah, I probably am, since I'm the senior person here, I probably have a little bit more of the history. About 40 years ago, our executive director, Paul Fleischman, was just trying to connect people. And one of the things they did was right around National Day of Prayer, they pulled everybody that was in town for National Day of Prayer together, and they called it Youth Ministry Executive Council. And that had some momentum behind it. And then the reality of needing local networks and just encouraging people to get together locally was birthed around the same time. And so the resources that you were talking about really grew from that. NNYM really had a huge footprint and a very big perspective. They had a whole bunch of ministries that ran parallel with networks. So they had networks that were specifically focused on different elements in youth ministry. In about 2008, the downsize of the economy forced NNYM to downsize. And so that's in that space is where you started to, they cut back on some of the production things and focused directly on our staff. And so I came on in 2012, and we were really looking at what does NNYM do well. And our executive director at the time, Daryl Nuss, was like, we need to focus on networking. Like that's what our focus is. So let's focus on that and do it really, really well. And we said, all right, what is a network? How do we define what networking is? Because networking could mean anything from multi-level marketing to, just you name it. Networking could kind of fall in that area. And so Daryl helped create a lean perspective on what networking was. And we really had started pouring more into staff and staff development and started building systems around helping our staff as they're all the way around the country. And it was really in that area where we focused on the collaborative efforts of youth workers that were being done around the country, started celebrating them. And we started saying, we don't own networks, but we champion them. And so that shifted us from, some people felt like they didn't want the authority structure of somebody telling them what to do. So we're like, hey, we're best practices. We're going to champion networks across the country. And if you're coming together to help your community reach more students for Christ, then you're a network, and here's some resources, and we just want to champion it along the way.
Yeah. Travis, you with doing the Northeast, can you talk a little bit about how the networks function? And I know you're overseeing a lot of them, and I see you on social media, here, there, and everywhere, plugging into those networks and visiting some of the different crews of folks who are meeting together. Just talk about that a little bit, and we'll include some links so that if people want to get into a network or investigate starting a network and having an NYM help them do that, we'll include that. But just a little bit on that, Travis.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it's. I always tell youth leaders, it's so simple. I mean, it's really just as easy as, hey, let's get together for lunch. Let's get together for coffee, for breakfast. Let's spend time sitting across the table from each other, usually over food, and let's talk. Let's talk about how we're doing as people in ministry. Let's talk about how our ministries are going. Let's encourage each other. Let's pray for each other. And if it's good to do that. It's good to do that on the national level, and it's good to do that. There's a lot of people you can connect with, over the internet and cohorts online and those kind of things. But there's just nothing quite like sitting across the table, face to face, in person, with colleagues in ministry who can encourage you and really help you walk through some of the challenges, some of the dark places of ministry that, I think a lot of guys get into ministry. They encounter some kind of obstacle, some kind of challenge, and they think, whoa, I don't know if I can get through this, until they sit down with somebody who says, oh yeah, I've been through that. That helps people in ministry to last longer. But the flip side of that is, you get together on, some kind of regular basis, maybe it's monthly, maybe it's quarterly, but you get together some kind of regular basis to celebrate the wins, right? You share the struggles, but you also celebrate the wins. And nobody understands the wins of youth ministry like a fellow youth worker. So when you have a kid who finally, they start reading their Bible on a regular basis, right? That sounds like a small thing, but only a youth leader knows, a youth pastor knows the blood, sweat, and tears it takes to take those small steps. And so, yeah, I mean, it's super simple. Just be together with others in ministry in your community in particular, because nobody knows what youth ministry is like in your community like the other leaders in your community.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's the.
I like how you say that, and I'm thinking about getting together. And youth ministry can be a lonely place. It is a difficult place. Spiritually speaking, any kind of ministry, right, where we're pushing on the kingdom of darkness with light, the truths of God's word, we're going to get pushback. And that's especially true in youth ministry. And the fact that so many in youth ministry don't have that support network makes it incredibly lonely. And it can be a place where you really, especially when you're younger, and it doesn't stop, right, as you get older, but you just can feel so defeated. And that's where, as you're saying this, Travis, I'm thinking about those who are older in youth ministry. And I'm finding, as I get older, there seems to be a lot more men and women in the youth ministry world who've been doing this for a long time. And there's so much wisdom that can come from them. And that's where, any of those who are listening, get involved in one of these networks, because the younger folks can really benefit from you. And the younger folks, look up to the older folks. I think we live in a world of ageism. We've talked about that here as a cultural trend, and, where the generations have been segmented, and it's unfortunate that's happened. We define ourselves more by, generationally where we're at than our shared humanity. And that's a shame in the body of Christ, and especially in the world of ministry. So, Tony, you're with the Lancaster Network. I mean, you're kind of new to this, I guess, and I know you've been working to establish that. What have you seen as some of the wins for the folks who are hopping on board in the Lancaster area here?
Yeah, what's been really neat is that maybe start with what hasn't been neat. In the past 5 to 6 years with COVID, there was a little bit of a almost non-existence of some youth ministry events that were happening. There was one or two maybe that popped up here and there, but and so there, in coming on staff with NNYM, part of my role was to try to bring some life to the Lancaster area and galvanizing youth workers together, because it's just such a highly saturated area of churches and even parachurches of youth centers that are in this area. And it's just a shame and discouraging that there's so many silos. And that's partially out of maybe the Amish Mennonite roots that are in the Lancaster County area, but it's also partially out of the fact that, for right or for wrong, we get busier in our own lane and don't collaborate together. And so part of what I've been seeking out over this time is to bring some opportunity for youth workers in Lancaster County to be together, to learn together, strategize together, so on and so forth, whether that's doing a leadership development seminar, whether that's a monthly, let's meet over coffee or Chick-fil-A, breakfast or lunch, to summits of learning and leadership together, and worship together. And so there's been opportunities that just by the sheer grace of God, there's been some really neat movement that's been happening over the past year, of more opportunity for youth workers to be together, big church, small church, workers coming together, volunteers and the paid workers. That's been neat as well to watch happen, and just trying to prayerfully consider, how do we galvanize, really is the word that keeps percolating into my brain, is like, how do we galvanize Lancaster County together for Jesus and the youth workers, and really just knock down those silos.
Yeah, and I was really impressed because I saw you guys a couple of months ago at that event at Lancaster Bible College. That I think you guys spearheaded that, right? Was that NNYM plus? Who else
it was Tony?
Yep.
Yeah, Tony. Talk about that, because those events locally are great. You know, we're finding that, and you know, before you say anything, we're finding the big events are gone, right? The big national events aren't there anymore, and I lament that, because I mean that's where I met most of you guys. You know, I remember seeing Travis and Wayne hanging out at a booth and, you know, chatting. I mean, I can even in my mind envision certain places where I met you guys and saw you at your booth. I have memories of that. And that's where there was a lot of exposure. CPYU got tons of exposure to those things, but now those things are gone for whatever reason, and that's fine. But, you know, to do these local events, and Tony, what you put together there, just say something about that, because that would be encouraging to folks in their geographic areas. I know when we go places, it's typically a local church will have me come in and speak, but I love it when a network or a camp will pull together networks of crews to do this, because there's strength in, you know, not just being together, but also getting more folks there. But talk about that event.
Yeah, so there was a bit of a dream behind it. I partnered up with Lancaster Bible College, the youth ministry professor, Rick Rosati, there, and being able to dream up, like, hey, what would it look like to bring something back to Lancaster County area? Because there had been stuff in years past where it is accessible to not just the paid worker, but the volunteer.
Yeah.
So we specifically planted it on a Saturday because we want to provide resources and value to the volunteer. The paid worker, though they still may be in a silo, they have resources to some degree as the paid person. And so what would it look like to provide something for the volunteer, or the person who's bivocational and doesn't have it as accessible to do something on a weekday? And the whole idea was called the Lancaster E3 Summit, and it was all about equipping, empowering, and encouraging youth workers, and try to, as best as possible, do about 4 hours worth of downloading into them appreciation, training, time for reflection, and worship together. And what was just so beautiful about it was we weren't sure how it was going to pan out by attendance. First time doing it, you never know what's going to happen. By God's grace, we had about 60 youth workers that were in the room. I don't quote me on this number, but there was probably about 40 volunteers to 20 paid people. So like it's a 2/3 was volunteers, and I'm like, okay, like so there's possibly a felt need here, and we want to, after getting feedback from people from this first one, we're already revving up. We actually had a planning meeting just the day prior to recording this episode, and we're working on the dates for 2027 and locate and so on and so forth. So we're excited about it, and really I go God across the board. And I fully acknowledge go God first and foremost, but also what I do acknowledge it takes someone who's willing to say, hey, I'll champion this. Like, hey, I'll pioneer this. Hey, I'm willing to take that step. And so that something like this could happen in any county, in any community. It's just the willingness for someone to say, I'm willing to pioneer it. I'm willing to galvanize people together. Which takes work. But the reward and the fruitfulness that can come out of it, whether it's 5 youth workers at a coffee shop to 60 at a Bible college, to hundreds at a different location. But it's worth it when you get youth workers together to learn together, worship together, be inspired together.
Yeah, I was there that day, and I'm glad you brought up the number of volunteers, because I was going to prompt you with that question there next. And you said about 40, which is about 2/3, and I noticed that, and I thought that was a wonderful thing. You know, as I have been around and I talk to people and meet people in the world of youth ministry, you guys do this as well. You know, tell me what you're doing, and a volunteer will typically start to tell you what it is they're doing in youth ministry with these words: "I'm just a volunteer." And I always pause right there and tell them to stop and say, "Don't say that," because the value that you bring, you know, Chris is a volunteer in his local church youth ministry here in Elizabethtown. The value that you bring to that is amazing. And I'm guessing all of us on this podcast and everybody listening, you know, if we said, all right, let's sit in a circle and, you know, who was a volunteer, someone who wasn't paid to do youth ministry, who left some sort of mark, deep mark on your life. And so I want to, just what you said there, Tony, I want to push on the youth workers who are listening, get your volunteers involved in these things. And it was a beautiful thing. You did that, you know, on a Saturday and made it affordable to be able to do that. The 3 E's. I love that. Yeah. Well, listen, we need to take a break here. When we come back, I want to pick the brains of these guys on some very practical things related to youth ministry, some of the things they're seeing, some of the advice that they would give, stuff they're seeing in the culture that we need to be aware of. That's going to be helpful for us here at CPYU as we work to develop responses to that. But stick with us, and we'll be right back. My dad used to say to me, "I'm so glad I'm not raising kids in today's world." And honestly, I get it. Those of us who are parents and youth workers are guiding kids through a youth culture that's rapidly changing, confusing, and sometimes frightening. The fact is, we do need help. That's exactly why I wrote a little book to put right into the hands of your kids. It's called A Student's Guide to Navigating Culture. This book is a practical tool designed to help kids develop biblical discernment. It teaches them the skills to look critically and Christianly at everything they face in today's world, evaluating it all under the light of God's Word so they can live a life of faithful discipleship. Whether it's used individually, read together as a family, or studied in a youth group setting, A Student's Guide to Navigating Culture is designed to instill godly wisdom. Equip the students in your life to integrate their faith into all of life. You can learn more and order your copies of A Student's Guide to Navigating Culture by visiting cpyu.org. Well, I'm having fun. I can see these guys. You can only hear them, but we're with Wayne Morgan, Travis Deans, and Tony Villafane, 3 guys who are working in long-term in the world of youth ministry and now all involved at some level with a national network of youth ministries. I love the mission of NNYM, and it was interesting to hear Wayne talk about what happened in 2008, because that was about the time that, you know, those of us who were going to the conventions and training and teaching, we were seeing and hearing maybe a little bit less than we had seen and heard in our own local church youth ministries in the decade or so before. And so it's been a joy for me to see this come back with renewed focus. Wayne said something to us during the break. I just want him to repeat that about, you know, the shift after COVID, about what you guys are trying to do, Wayne. Just say something about that.
Yeah, when during COVID, we kind of felt like national conferences probably weren't going to come back. And so we commissioned our team to really focus in on regional things because those also translate a whole lot better. You know, like COVID showed us that each location was handling the realities different. And so, specializing in something like Lancaster County, they have a different reality than, say, New York City. And so, being able to look at things more regional, and then also how do we incorporate volunteers, because the volunteers were staying engaged in youth ministry, and then the youth pastors were actually experiencing burnout at higher levels. So we were like, man, how do we encourage youth leaders that are volunteer? And I mean, our mission shifted to like create collaborative spaces for personal encouragement, professionally equipping, and spiritually strengthening youth workers. So we wanted to dial in on not just, getting together, but actually like encouraging each other, building each other up, and getting back to the mission.
Yeah, some of you youth workers who may be listening now may be sparked to think as you hear these guys chat about how to get these things started in your community. And I just want to remind you, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, if you go to cpyu.org and you go to the player for this particular episode of the podcast, you can scroll down underneath and you will find links to everything that we mentioned, the website, obviously, for the National Network of Youth Ministries. But I also, if it's okay, I'd love to include contact information for you guys personally, because somebody might be listening to say, I need to talk to Tony about how they did that in, Lancaster. I want to talk to Travis about 9-month mission trip, or, I want to get to Wayne to talk about, some other aspect of youth ministry. So we'll be sure to put contact information there for you guys, so that folks can get through to you. I got a question here, just out of your experience, because I know that wisdom comes with experience. So I'm going to throw this. It's a very generic question, but I want to hear your answers to this, because I love hearing this kind of stuff. So I'm a new youth worker. Imagine I'm a new youth worker, and I come to you, and I ask each of you, give me 3 things I need to prioritize as I get started in youth ministry. And one reason why I think this is such an important question is because all of us who have been in youth ministry for a while probably wish we had asked this question at some point, because we learn a lot from our mistakes and our blunders and things like that. And I know when I got started, I was working pretty much with peers. There weren't a lot of long-term youth ministry people. I would go to a network, everybody was my age. And when I would go to the Philly network and, meet guys there, we'd have 40, 50 guys in those meetings, which was great, but we were all peers. So go ahead. I don't care who starts on this, but give us 3 things. And as I told you during the break, hey, overlap is fine. Pound it home to us.
I would recommend these 3 things. If you're a new youth pastor, you're undoubtedly going to spend a lot of time with your students in your ministry. But I would recommend spending time with 3 other people, 3 other groups of people. Number one, I would recommend, as a new youth leader, getting to know the parents of the students in your ministry, right? Spend a good deal of time, as much time as you can, getting to know the parents of your students, because that's going to tell you a lot about your students, about what this ministry needs to look like, what it should look like, what it could look like. So get to know the parents. Number 2, I would say to a new youth leader, spend as much time as you can getting to know your lead pastor, because in a larger church that may or may not be possible, but in a mid-sized church or small church, you want to be on the same page with your lead pastor as much as possible, because that's going to minimize conflict. It's going to help you meet expectations, and it's going to help you because you don't want to build a youth ministry that's something separate from the rest of the church. You want to build a youth ministry that flows with the whole culture and vision and mission of the church. And so, spending time with your lead pastor is going to be key. It's going to set you up for a lot of success. And saying that, I know that some youth pastors, that's not a good experience, and I understand that's true. But in any case, I think in general, that's a good principle. The third thing I would say is find a youth ministry mentor. And you alluded to this, Walt, that if you can, find someone who's been in it longer than you, Find someone who's farther down the road, 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, and pick their brain as much as possible. And so if that's as part of a network, great. I obviously encourage that, but maybe it's one-on-one, but find somebody who can be a youth ministry mentor to you. And I think those three groups of people are going to set you up for a successful ministry with your students.
Yeah, and I'm just going to weigh in, Travis. Those things are great. And I think if you ignore any of those three, and I think some people to their demise have not gone after all three of those. If you ignore any of those, you're going to find yourself in trouble because you're there, obviously, first. I love how you mentioned parents. I mean, I think family ministry, intergenerational ministry is important. It's foundational. Parents are the ones who are primarily responsible, and we're on the same team. And parents, I want to encourage you, if you're listening, to get to know your youth pastor because they care deeply about your kids. And if spiritual nurture of your kids and seeing them come to faith and grow in faith is your top priority, you want to walk alongside them. And I also want to say about the lead pastor, if there are any pastors listening, Travis, you kind of faltered there for a minute when you said, I know that's not possible in some bigger churches, but I want to encourage, no matter what size the church is, I want to say to the lead pastor, you have got to spend time with your staff. And the youth ministry staff, that is so important for you to do that. So, yeah, good. Other guys, what do you come up with?
Go, Tony. I'm still thinking.
I'm still thinking too. All right. I got two. I know I got two. So the first one I would say, and I'm going to speak both to the paid worker and the volunteer worker. But the first one that comes in my brain space is to remember over and over again that God doesn't need you. We so easily live in the world of the savior complex of if I don't, who will? Or God needs me to do this, or that student, that teenager needs me, and we fill in that blank of like, oh, well, I have to meet their needs, and we churn the hamster wheel of go, work, and workaholism, and honestly, the idolatry even of doing things for God. And so there is a need to remind yourself, God doesn't need me. He wants to use me, but he doesn't need me. And so to the paid person and to the volunteer, just as a reminder that God doesn't need us is thing number one. Thing number two, I would say is remind yourself. So for the paid person, for the paid youth pastor, I would say remind yourself that the order of this sounds maybe bad to say, but the order of authority, that as you lead volunteers, you are their boss first, their friend second, and to remind them that you can easily blur the line at times of being like their friend to your volunteer team, to your and I personally have gotten into some trouble with this in good intention. Like, I want to be their friend. And then it makes me almost lower the accountable standard that I have with them at times. And so being careful that as the paid person, it sounds businessy or raw, but like to say, okay, I'm leading them first, and then I'm their friend or being friendly with them. I need to make sure I keep that in order, so I keep them accountable as I shepherd them, as they shepherd students, so on and so forth. And then to the volunteer, I would say the same exact thing, is that remind yourself that you are their small group leader first, and then your friend or friendly second. You're not their bestie, you're not their pal. Like, you are shepherding them, you're guiding them, you're mentoring them. So like, remind yourself as a volunteer that you are leading them first, being friendly second, because you don't want to get onto that level of like friend with them, so that when you do need to be accountable to them, they buck back at it. They don't accept it because, oh, well, like, you're just my bestie, like I'm not going to receive your authority, so on and so forth. So like, kind of reminding of that. That's a massive can of worms that I could open up there, but that's number two. Number three is to say, you gotta make sure, no matter what, you're prioritizing family. Like, you're prioritizing your soul and your family. This kind of is like a 1.B, if you will, of my first point, but like, you got one soul, you gotta cherish it well, and and one family, cherish it well. And it's okay. It's okay. Like, sometimes it sounds terrible to say, but in the ministry where we need like the permission to rest, and the permission to take our off day and the permission to use our vacation time. And so just to explicitly say, youth worker paid, you have the permission to use your off days and be with family and rest and so on and so forth. So just to like really, really prioritize that is like a huge piece, I would say, to a new person. And yeah.
Yeah, I love all three of those. You started with two and you thought of the third while you were telling us the first two, so that's a sign of a great brain. I loved how you did that. You know, you stacked them up. But listen, I want to say something about those. That last one, man, just that was driven home to me. And I'm fortunate. I grew up in a pastor's home. I was the oldest of three boys, and priorities changed when I was 5 years old. And there was some things happened that made my dad young in ministry change his priorities, and I benefited. My brothers benefited. The neighborhood kids benefited from that reality. I can't say enough about that. And man, I'm just going to mention this because as you were saying that, Tony, I was thinking about some of the generation before me, the older guys who really established youth ministry. Many of them are the church's leaders, many of them are the parachurch's leaders, and I can't tell you how many, as I got to know them, were on their second marriage. And it was heartbreaking to me to learn this, and they had just thrown everything into their ministries and nothing into their marriages. And I'll just say this, that if your spouse says to you, I say this to Lisa all the time, I'm so appreciative of her, that we marry, that, God, I think God gives us the spouse we need, and you need a spouse who's willing to call you out if your priorities are tipping in the wrong direction, and don't fight it, because perception is reality. If your spouse comes to you, man in youth ministry, woman in youth ministry, and says, hey, you know what, this is out of line, listen, don't fight. I think that's big. And then the other thing you said, Tony, which I thought was really good, was on the order of authority. I thought that was great. Not many people talk about that, about paid with the volunteers, but I would even go up a step further in the chain of authority. And Travis talked about lead pastors. We as and I say we as young people because I'm older now, but we tend to be younger than our lead pastors and our elders. And I think we can sometimes develop a cavalier attitude that they have no idea what they're talking about. But God's established that chain of authority, and I think we need to respect that and listen to that. One of the things Chris and I talk was when we track with the youth ministry forums, you'll often find someone, they posted honestly, I just got fired. And immediately the people who are chiming in are immediately blaming, without knowing any of the circumstances or even the person who's posting, those doggone lead pastors and elders in the church. And look, we all are broken people working with broken people, and man, we can screw up, and we have to own that, when that happens. So, all right, Wayne, wisdom.
Oh man, my mind's going a million directions, but Travis at the practical with the parent ministry, and once you become a parent, you realize how busy parents really are.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wow. So yeah, I doubled down on that. But like the three that kind of popped into my head were recognize as a teacher you're held to a higher standard from James 3.
Oh yeah.
There is so many youth workers that are shocked that people are that there's a higher expectation, and we, to kind of pair along with that, walk worthy of your calling from Ephesians 4. Like, this isn't just a job. We are called into a space where we get to shepherd souls for eternity, to eternity. And so I think there's sometimes we fail to recognize the holiness and the sacredness of this space. And so I think that's something that is a priority, is recognized as a leader, as a teacher, you're held to a higher standard. the second thing is like, do your best to walk worthy. And that means growing, that means maturing. And so there's going to be times where you have a conversation with somebody that's in authority and they're going to tell you you need to do certain things. And that's like, all right, I'm going to grow. I've got to make this decision. And then the last one, I just feel like it's just dropped out. Maybe it's because in modern translations of the scripture, but the one that really pops out to me is in First Thessalonians chapter 5. It says, "Abstain from the appearance of evil" in the King James, "flee every kind of evil." Man, there's so much that, because we're culture experts, right? Like, because we're missionaries to the next generation, that there are times where instead of investigating some of the things that are going on in culture, we actually start to enjoy them. And, like, just keeping that check on our soul. Am I enjoying this element of culture just a little bit too much? Am I making it part of who I am? Am I actually living like I am, aliens and strangers of this world? Or is this really making me comfortable? So uh, it always frightens me when we get to a youth pastors network meeting and just hearing what we're entertained by and what we're hearing, and I'm just like, oh guys, like, like, ladies and gentlemen, we are called to such a higher calling in a sacred space. And yes, we should know, but there also is an untethering from the authority of those things in our lives that, and so the people who have longevity, so I wanted to focus a little bit more on the soul space. Like, Tony mentioned the marriage space. So I'm thinking, like, guard your soul, guard your heart, because out of it is the wellspring of life. And so, so sometimes when we're in ministry, our job is to be spiritual, but that's an intentional discipline that we have to have.
Wayne, I love this, and I love all that you said there, and I just want to jump back into the last number 3 for you, because I think that's wisdom we need to hear, and I think it's wisdom that doesn't play well in the world today. It doesn't land well, and the reason for that is that I think the undercurrents, the major, we talk a lot about, micro trends, things we see that we've got to address in youth ministry. We talked about ageism earlier, or loneliness, or, we can talk about whatever. I'm working on something on comparison right now and how that's just destroying us. Those are like micro trends, but there are bigger trends that are underneath. If you think of it like an iceberg, those are things we see above. But one of the things that is below is just that the pluralism and tolerance, which comes out of the whole postmodern movement, which we've looked at here for 30 years at CPYU. And we see that without even knowing it, how it's affected us. Like, why would you challenge me on what I watch or what I listen to? And we are called, as you've said, to a higher standard. And so we need to build up those borders and boundaries. And look, some of us can go places that others can't. We have to recognize that. But there are many places none of us should actually be going to, right? We can know the mission field, but we don't want to become the mission field, because we're immersed in these things. Because these things, they influence us, Duffy Robbins and I were just 2 weeks with our doctoral students, a whole week, 2 weeks on culture and cultural exegesis. And one of the things we do is we talk about borders and boundaries when you study culture. You start to enjoy things that you should just know and not enjoy. That's an issue. Pull back. And I've been around it long enough and done this long enough to know that there are times when I can see the darkness encroaching, and it doesn't really hit you until it's pretty dark, and it just happens.
And surprising.
Yeah. And then you're going, man, I got to step back and I got to change some things. And so, I think here, Chris and I, because of what we do here and with our crew, we know the darkness. We see it, and I think too many just dabble in it way too much. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons that I've really, like, I trust CPYU, and when you guys give like referrals and you give like, this is a culture snapshot, like, I don't have to go watch something or listen to something, because I'm like, all right, somebody with more maturity than I has at least looked at it, and so I'm going, okay, this is as far as I want to go, because I also know as a youth leader, everything that I do is permission. And
Yes.
I saw that the first time I was a youth pastor. We were on a missions trip, and these kids bought a fart machine of all things, right? And I told them, keep it.
I was wondering
it
how long
hidden.
that would be till be with a group of youth workers, and we get to that. Yeah, thanks for bringing that. That's great.
No worries. But so like I used it once, like because we were broke down at this rest stop. And the guys got kicked out of the rest stop with our cars broken down in the parking lot. And I was like, if I hadn't had joked around and played around with with those guys, they would never have taken it to the level, because my effort with them just gave them permission.
Yeah.
And then they took it to excess, So I think that that's the other component to, like, I live a holy life, not just for me, but those who follow me. And I think that that's, I cannot know about certain things because it's so interesting when I have a parent tell me, well, it's not that bad of a movie except for this one part, you know?
It's all relative, right? And we tend to go to the worst to justify something that's less than the worst. Which is an issue. You know what you brought up before we take our second break here? You brought, all of you, as you were talking about this, you brought this to mind, and that when Tony was talking about like sort of the chain of command there, a leader, paid leader with volunteers, and then even what you just said, Wayne, there is a huge difference. But we sometimes in the world of youth ministry, and I push this through our educational process here when we're teaching youth workers about culture and engaging culture and studying culture. There is a huge difference between being culturally relevant and culturally informed. That many times we push into cultural relevance, which means we're going to adopt the forms that are out there in the world. We're going to adopt the styles that are out there in the world. And youth workers, as we get older, we realize we're not cool. You know what? And live into that. Just embrace it. Kids need to have adults who aren't trying to be kids. And so the difference between cultural relevance and culturally informed means I'm taking the time to learn what you have to navigate. I'm taking the time to understand what you're dealing with. And I'm doing that because I want to know you as I'm a cross-cultural missionary and you're on the cross-cultural mission field, and I want to instill wisdom and discernment in you as I help you navigate the culture. That's maturity, and that's, I think, what you guys are talking about. And we really push on that. Last week, I was up, Lisa flew up to Boston a week ago to join us up there, Duffy, Maggie, and myself. Duffy and I were up there teaching. And so I was to pick her up at 9 o'clock. Her flight at Logan, her flight was 2.5 hours delayed. So I sat at the baggage area for 2.5 hours. And as baggage areas go and baggage comes late, there was a small group. It was 2 mothers and 4 teenage girls. And I honestly, they were right in front of me for about 45 minutes waiting for their luggage. Nobody else was around. And I eavesdropped on this thing. I mean, I observed, right? And at first, I had to look closely to see who the mothers were. And then I had to think to myself, they're trying every which way to not be the mothers, but to be friends of these kids and to watch the postures and hear the conversation with these teenage girls. To me, it was alarming. I know that it may sound judgmental, but that's kind of what you guys are talking about. We can't try so hard to be buddies that we lose our ability to really teach. So I think this is great. All right, we're going to take another break. When we come back, I want to hear a little bit about what you guys are seeing in the culture and some other practical advice as we finish up this great conversation with Tony and Travis and Wayne.
If you enjoy listening to Youth Culture Matters and would like to support the ongoing efforts of this ministry, you can do so by visiting cpyu.org/giving to make a donation. Your prayers and financial support make this podcast possible.
So I want to remind everybody who's listening, do this a couple times every podcast because we want you to make use of the resources that are mentioned, that if you go to cpyu.org, find the player for this particular episode, scroll down, and we'll have lots of resource connections there for you, including links to the National Network of Youth Ministries. What's the web address of NNYM? I'm sure it's pretty simple.
Yeah, NNYM.org.
Yep. I actually knew that because I have it written down, but I thought I'd let one of you guys say it. So NNYM.org, you need to go there, and lots of stuff you can access there. You'll learn more about their story, about how they're working to impact the world of youth ministry, looking ahead, all sorts of things. And I think you can actually go there and find a network, right? You put your contact info in, and you might be surprised that you'll find a network that's near you, or you can get one started. These guys will certainly help you with that. Tony, during the break, by the way, we lost Travis. We don't know where he went. He was in his car. He was in his car when he was talking to us, and I don't know if he just lost his connection or what, but we'll see if he hops back on. But we'll carry it on with you two guys. Tony, you said something during the break. You wanted to add a number 4 to what you shared with us in the last segment.
Yes. With the conversation being had, I was thinking about an honorary number 4 item, and it revolves around culture, which is what you were kind of speaking into. But the idea of how culture directly ties into your mission, your vision, your values, and how so let me speak to the paid worker, and then I'll go to the volunteer. To the paid worker, as you are in charge of building the culture, you're in charge of owning it, you're in charge of protecting it. You do that practically through knowing your mission statement, knowing your values that you help drive the organization, and a vision statement of some sort. So I would just so highly encourage someone to that's a paid worker, what is your mission statement in your ministry context? What are the values that drive it, and a vision statement behind it, and so on and so forth. And the knee-jerk response could be, oh, well, that's great. That's just words on a paper or words on a wall. To which I would say, you're absolutely right. But you drive the culture of that. And that's why it's your job to own it, build it, and protect it. So just so highly important as you do your why, the why of what you do on the regular. To the volunteer, I would then say the same concept, but being if you may not be the paid person that is tasked to coming up with these things per se, but do you know what they are in your organization? Do you know what they are on your team? And how are you helping shape the culture of the mission, of the vision, of the values? And if you don't have something in your ministry context and you're a volunteer in a ministry, I don't know my mission statement, go ask your person, go ask your youth pastor, go ask your director or whatever. If you don't have values, maybe be the one to say, hey, could we come up with values for our volunteer team? Could we come up with values for the ministry context? Because again, that helps shape the culture of what you want, the preferable future of what is of what you're building towards in kingdom work. And so I just think that's so vitally important as leaders, that whether you're paid or not, that is something that is evident, and it's lived out then through the practicing of culture.
Yeah, and check your church, because your church may have some of those statements already. And I think, as you said, or one of you said earlier, allow that to grow out of, so you know what your church's statement is on all those things, because then you're lined up, right? You're not fighting against.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just to know,
Right.
I mean, we have hanging here on our walls some of the good work our board has done, and that our staff holds to and our board holds to. I'm holding it in my hand right now. Mission, purpose, vision, core values, strategic objectives, and I just think to establish those. And I think maybe if you haven't done that, and I don't know if you guys have any tools online to make that happen through the network, but I know there's some sources of those things out there. If you're the paid person, work through that. Kind of have in your mind what you want. This is not manipulative, but have in your mind what you want and what you're not gonna waffle on. And then get your volunteers to adopt that, and that becomes part of your DNA. And so as you recruit new volunteers to come in, or new folks come into the ministry, or you need to share that with parents, they at least know what that is. So the culture, I want to finish up by talking about that. What are you guys seeing that, I'll frame it this way, and this will be helpful to us because we keep our ear to the ground all the time to hear what's going on, and we want to be on the crest of the wave, obviously, so we can produce resources like our parent prompts and other things. But what are you guys seeing that you would say from where you sit, youth workers need to be aware of this trend or that trend, or you need to watch this or be careful about this, or, think about, how you're going to respond to this theologically and biblically, how you might, it might steer you away from certain things. Yeah. So, what are some of the things you're seeing and hearing that youth workers right now need to be aware of?
Mm.
I mean, I'll throw something in right now because I read it this morning because it just came out.
Yeah.
The let me get the name right. It's at Surgeon General's advisory, Chris, and you just posted a link to it on our site at cpyu.org. But on teens and screen time, or children and screen time, because it's not just teens, and so that's a big one.
The title is Surgeon General's Warning on the Harms of Screen Use, an Advisory and Toolkit and on How to Protect Children and Adolescents.
Yeah, it's something I think we need to, as youth workers, lean into. We're looking at it here. I've been in the process of reading and thinking about it this morning. We're going to probably do a podcast next week on it where we do a roundtable on it. But then passing that on to parents and then thinking about what are the dangers and warning signs are and how we, in very practical ways, in our ministries can push back on that. I'm sure you guys are seeing that and hearing that, things related to technology, if not screen time, other things as well. So don't be afraid to mention whatever.
Yeah, one of the things in those along those lines was just got a book, When Screens Go Quiet, from from what's going on in Australia.
Yes.
So that was, I got connected with the author there through the organization Next Move, which is an evangelistic organization that tries to create collaborations. But just the effects of what's going on in Australia as a result of pulling away from screens. And so I've been a huge advocate looking at brain studies, seeing what goes on when we use smart devices, whether you're getting into good things or not. Just the use of screens is just super detrimental for the brain development of students. And so I've been an advocate. My son didn't get himself a smartphone until he was 18 years old. And he only got a smartphone because his boss required him to do it for payroll. So he had a flip phone all the way through. So the more we can do to protect our kids, they're also seeing that creativity, imagination, all of those things are really, really hampered because we're instantly pacified by the moving screens. And so it's slowing down our ability to be, how God designed us.
Yeah, it's interesting. In our doctorate ministry cohort, the last 2 weeks, we have a student from Australia, and she's a Bible teacher with YWAM, and she comes over, and it was interesting as we were doing cultural exegesis to see her response to some of the cultural artifacts that we were working through, related to music, media, and other things. And she clearly was at an advantage over everybody else because of her ignorance, and she hadn't been affected by these things in the same way that some of the rest of us had. And so that was really refreshing to see. Thanks for pointing that out, and we'll include a link to that as well. I think there's some research that we've seen that we've posted from Australia as well, either news reports or studies that are helpful on that. And can I piggyback on that, Wayne, and just say, this is where I say to youth workers, get the paper Bibles out. Don't read off screens because other windows are open. I mean, and even just the way we read. You're obviously familiar, Wayne, with some of the brain research and the fact that we read differently on a screen as opposed to the printed page. And it's deficient reading on a screen compared to how we read on the page. That doesn't mean don't read on screens ever, but I think that's good. And there's a lot of pushback now on screens in churches too. That some churches are actually removing those. You mentioned the dumb phone or the flip phone. Even students themselves are choosing, without any push from adults, to say, I'm getting rid of the smartphone and I'm going to get a dumb phone because that smartphone's undermining my human flourishing. So kids are seeing, when kids see it, like, man.
I tell you what, man, that's one of the things as a camp speaker for the last 10 years. Kids would be at the end of their camp experience going, I wish I didn't have to have my phone, but my parents.
Yep.
And so I think that there also is an awareness for parents. Yeah, you have Life 360. Yeah, you've got all of this stuff that you can really know where your kid is and be, aware of things, but it might be also really killing your kid. And so I think having an honest conversation about smartphone usage, because I mean, and it isn't just smartphones. There's the digital learning.
Yeah.
I if I would have paid attention a little bit more, but there was somebody that just a couple of months ago had talked about how the decline in cognitive development in this generation because of digital, because we're learning off of screens. And so we see places like Sweden, going back to books. I was actually at a conference, and a guy was working construction in a school in upstate New York where they had eliminated computers from the library, and they were going back to books. So there is kind of a groundswell too of things happening where people are seeing that you're not learning as well as you think you are off of the digital device, and there is a move, but it isn't huge. It's just in little pockets. So
yeah. I'm going to piggyback on that with a little hobby horse. Chris knows where I'm going to go on this, but online learning in higher education, graduate education, theological education, I am so suspicious of that. And a lot of it is based on research. It's based on experience. It's based on being a teacher in the classroom. It's based on evaluating the work that's being done, whether it's face-to-face or online. And I think, hybrid, that's a better option than completely online. And it's just, and with AI now. So I'm going to stop right there because I could get going. That's another podcast. Look at Chris laughing over there. He knows. Yeah, we have those conversations here all the time. Youth workers have to learn. That's one of my 3 things. The older you get in youth ministry, the more you have to realize how much you don't know. That's just the way it is. I feel like that with myself. Tony, do you have anything culturally that you want to bring up?
Yeah, a few things that pop into my head. I don't feel like I have anything wildly profound, but one thing I've noticed, as again, I'm a part-time youth pastor, so I get to be with my students on the weekly, and it's what I'm noticing with them is that, and then even a broader Lancaster, Chester County area in PA, there's a really neat trend upward of students wanting to gather for Bible studies on their own more organically. And I am watching this and I'm just like, holy crap, like how can I like breathe fire and light into and wind into that, because like this is so good. Like they don't need me. like guidance, sure. Encouragement, yes. Redirection if it's heretical, sure. But like it's the desire to watching teenagers like pop on their Instagram story and be like, yeah, I'm having the Bible study at the park at 10 a.m. Would love to see you there. Like I'm seeing that. And it's just really, really fun to watch. Even TikTok, like I'm watching some of my students like go on TikTok and do like verse of the day and sharing this stuff in scripture. And I'm like, this is so beautiful. It's so cool to see. So I'm seeing like a surge of that, which is really neat. On the flip side though, let me stay on the TikTok part, is that like, I am also watching some students watching students like gravitate way too quickly to like 1-minute clips of things that are either taken out of context or it's more not really good theology. And I've gotten sent some stuff being like, oh, this is so cool, check this out. And I'm like, there might be some flags there that we need to talk about. And so to be aware that, which again, this is not anything new per se, but to be aware of how much your teens are consuming content online, and to trying to give them handles on how to navigate that space, and some accountability if possible in that. But that there really is some, as obviously as we know, there's some dangerous stuff that can be found online that looks appealing, and that they that however we can help in that specific regard. Another thought that comes to mind is
can I stop you there? Because I want to ask you a question. What do you attribute? Have you kind of dug down deeper to see, what is it that's driving these kids to gather for these Bible studies, prompted by themselves?
Man, I think that something that we have seen in Gen Z that we are seeing even stronger in Gen Alpha is their desire for authenticity and their desire for organic and something that's not forced. And so I think that Gen Z really started to get that. And then Gen Alpha has really come so strongly on that, like, let's own this stuff. Like, let's be a part of it. and let's make stuff happen. And here's what's cool is that like what I'm watching in Gen Z, what I'm watching in Gen Alpha is like they're okay if it's not perfect. Like and they just want to give it a try. They just want to experiment. They just want to. Now, obviously, there's negative that can come from that for sure. But like I am watching like a teenager be like, yeah, I'm gonna post stuff on social media that's biblical, that's uplifting, and I don't know how good it's gonna be, but I'm willing to do it. Bible studies that like I don't really know how I'm gonna do this, but I'm willing to like let's just give it a try. And there's this they're being inspired, and I can only say that's inspiration of the Holy Spirit. Inspiration from some people, some caring adults that are coming alongside them and encouraging them. But like they are gripping the excitement and the curiosity, if you will, and they're willing to take a curious step forward.
Yeah,
spiritually speaking, and so I'm watching more of that.
I like that. I like that because they're learning to use social media redemptively to promote things that are good, true, right, and honorable, rather than putting forth way too much on what I call the quote unquote holy trinity of me, myself, and I, which is what social media has become, and it's become that for adults, and it is just so concerning, when you see that. All right, you were gonna mention something else there, Tony.
Yeah, in the name of social media, if someone's looking for a way to try to keep up, there's no way you can possibly keep up with all the words, all the trending things, and all that stuff. But there's one social media individual that I do like to track, and the account is Mr. Lindsay. He is a middle school teacher, and he ends up regularly posting. Here are the words that I've been hearing in my middle school classes this week, and it's good, it's funny, and it's but also temptingly it gives you a lens into what are middle schoolers saying that's relevant to their vernacular, no matter how ridiculous it is. So Mr. Lindsay is one that I would recommend pretty well. Here's one last comedic one of just a cultural trend I'm seeing. Hacky sack is back.
Yes.
And I saw I heard a couple of my students talk about it just a number of weeks ago, recording this episode, and I was like, wait, hacky, like hacky sack, like the small ball with beads in it, and they're like, yeah. I'm like, dude, like that was a part of my childhood. Playing hacky, and so I went online, and like New York Times and other people are posting about how hacky is making a comeback, and so I was like, that's awesome, that's so random, and just to see the things that come back in circles of trends over the decades. But like hacky sack is back. By the time give it a couple months, it'll die again. But it's just funny to see that that's back.
Yeah, I want to see yo-yos. That's what I want to see. Yeah.
Ooh.
So, man, Mr. Lindsay, I'm going to throw this in right before we're going to wrap this up. But where we are in New England, up at Gordon Conwell Seminary, Duffy Robbins and I stay at a hotel. We've been there for 15 years every year, and for at least a couple of weeks, 4 weeks, and so we've gotten to know the staff, and we also know the rhythm of what goes on up there in May and June when we're up there, and that's when school trips take place. So if I wake up in the morning and I pull the curtains open, I look out the window and I see 4 coach buses parked out in the parking lot, I know it's time to get down to breakfast and get down there now, because it's school trips, primarily middle school students. So the first bus, I came back and I saw a bus. This was after class. I saw a bus in the afternoon, and I go in and I walk to the elevator, and there's a woman, middle-aged woman who's waiting for the elevator as well. And I said, "Are you with that coach bus group?" I said, "I'm wondering who that is." And she said, "Oh, no, I'm not with that group, but it's a bunch of middle schoolers on a trip." And then she added this. I thought this was gold. She goes, "They're adorable. They're adorable." And if only we would think of middle schoolers like that, right? And they were great, so for the whole 2 weeks, I'm down there at breakfast with these middle school kids having conversations, and they were awesome. And it's fun to watch the teachers bring them in and, corral them and give them all the rules for what they're supposed to be and how they're supposed to be overnight. But middle schoolers, yeah, it's great. And hacky sack. Well, this is so good. So here's what we typically do. I'm going to ask you each to give a sentence or two of encouragement as we finish up to youth workers. So what would your final parting words be? I'll start with Wayne. Give us a your gem of wisdom.
Over everything, I think the idea of "by this shall all men know you're my disciples" is your love for one another. That was Jesus' parting words to his disciples. Paul writes it all the way through his books. I think that sometimes in the American church, we've forgotten that our love for each other should be a marker. And so that's another one of the reasons that I network is it's commanded by Jesus. And so, and when you have peers and you can share that love of Christ, it encourages you so you can love your students better.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Tony.
At the beginning, I talked about how God doesn't need you. I actually want to ironically swing the pendulum, and to say that through a story, God wants to use you. He wants you to be present and to invest. We mentioned Billy Graham at the very, very beginning. I don't know if you know this about Billy Graham, but like I learned this a number of months ago, and I was inspired by it. That you just don't know the impact that you could have on a teenager. And Billy Graham at 15 was persistently invited to a revival service by a 24-year-old friend named Albert. And finally, Billy said yes to going to this revival service, and that changed his life into the Billy Graham that ended up being who he was. But Albert, 24-year-old Albert, kept on asking him to just come to the event. And so what I would say to the youth worker is, like, you don't know the level of impact that you're going to have on a teenager. You just get to show up, be consistent, be full of character, and invest in the name of discipleship. And not to say that you're going to raise up the next Billy Graham, but you never know what type of impact you could have when you just show up. Albert didn't know that he was going to create that verbiage, but like he would help stir on who is to be Billy Graham. He just invited. And so like to be able to say, hey, like that is our call, to show up, to invest, to be intentional. Let God do the rest.
Yeah, be faithful and obedient, show up. I love that. And you're never going to know. This side of heaven, you may know a little bit of your legacy if you're fortunate, but you'll never know. You'll never know. Well, you guys, thank you so much. We'll thank Travis. We have no idea where he is right now. I texted him and he hasn't answered, but anyway, we're so grateful for what he's doing, Wayne, for what you're doing, Tony, for what you're doing nationally, locally, and we look forward to see how the National Network for Youth Ministries really expands and grows and fuels a good movement of biblically faithful youth ministry that's forming kids into the image of Christ. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so all of you, again, thanks for joining us, and we will chat with you the next time on the next episode of Youth Culture Matters.
Thanks for joining us for Youth Culture Matters, a podcast from the Center for Parent-Youth Understanding. If you'd like to learn more about today's youth culture, visit our website at cpyu.org. And if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, email us at podcast@cpyu.org.